Welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study. In this series of Bible studies, we'll be taking a closer look at the Bible's evidence for the completion of the prolonged Judgment Day and the end of the world occurring in the year 2033. And now here's your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann.
Hello and welcome to E-Bible Fellowship's Bible Study in the book of Jonah. This is study number 28 of Jonah chapter 1, which is a part of our ongoing series that is looking at the biblical evidence for the end in the year 2033. And in Jonah, we find Jonah has entered into the ship, gone down into the sides of it, and was asleep. Verse 5, then the mariners were afraid. There was a mighty tempest in the sea. The ships like to be broken. Then the mariners were afraid and cried every man unto his God, and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the shipmaster came to him and said unto him, what meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God, if so be that God will think upon us that we perish not. Arise, wake up, wake up. And in the New Testament, that's exactly the situation, a historical situation. It's a historical parable when Jesus enters into a ship and he goes to sleep. In Luke 8, we read in verse 22, now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and he said unto them, let us go over unto the other side of the lake. And they launched forth. But as they sailed, he fell asleep. And there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water, and were in jeopardy. And they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. Okay, you can see the pieces. Storm, a mighty tempest, it says in Jonah 1. First, Jonah enters the ship. Christ enters the ship. Storm at sea, mighty tempest, and same in the account in Matthew 8. It uses the word earthquake. In Matthew 8, verse 24, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea. And the Greek word's earthquake. A great earthquake in the sea, so that the waves are rising up. Now, was there a literal earthquake? And as we know, tsunamis. I don't think we have to think that, although it's possible. It's possible, but the big thing is the spiritual picture. The sea represents the wrath of God. It's going to destroy that ship and the disciples who are on board that ship, just like the ship Jonah's on board. The mighty tempest will destroy the mariners. They'll be shipwrecked. The ship was like to be broken. And when you're shipwrecked in a bad storm like that, people perish. People die. They'll die by drowning in the sea. And that's a picture of coming under the wrath of God. So we see these things, and we also see Jonah's asleep. The Lord Jesus is asleep. And I've mentioned this. Let me go to Ephesians 5. It helps to actually read the verse. I quoted it last time, but here you can hear it right from the Bible. Ephesians 5:14. Wherefore he saith, awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Now, that's speaking to the sinner, dead in sin, spiritually asleep. Awake thou that sleepest, rise from the dead, and Christ will give thee light. That is, the scriptures will be enlightened to your understanding. You'll have the light of the Spirit of God within you. Uh, but here in Luke chapter 8's account, as they cross the sea, they're going to the other side. They want to go to the other side, but first there has to be the storm, because it's a historical parable picturing Jesus must come to his people. And again, here the ship would represent Israel. And I mentioned this before, Acts 27 ship, which is shipwreck, the end of the church. The ship identifies with the corporate church. Jonah 1, that ship identifies with Israel, and Christ's first coming, and same when Jesus has already come, he is in the land of Israel. He's crossing the Sea of Galilee. The storm arises. He's asleep. Spiritually, he dies. He dies. See, it's only Christ's death that will satisfy the demands of the law of God. And a raging sea, yes, it identifies with false prophets, but the sea, the body of water, identifies with God's wrath, his anger, to be drowned in the sea like Pharaoh and the Egyptians, is because they angered God, and sin angers God. And so all, as it were, will drown in the sea of God's wrath and be destroyed. So Christ goes to the grave. He dies. And this again is pointing to what happened at the foundation of the world when he bears the sins of his people. The law of God demands justice for sin. Christ pays the penalty. The wages of sin is death. Jesus pays the price of death. And now, now this is an important point that we don't often think about, that it's not just the death of Christ, it's not just the death, but it's his rising from the dead. Notice here in Luke 8:24, and they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. Or over in Mark 4, it says in verse 37, and there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full, and that means full of water, full of the wrath of God, showing the threat, the tremendous danger of their drowning, of, again, spiritually, the picture of dying at the hands of an angry God. It was now full, and he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And here the word is the pillow, asleep on a pillow. It means asleep. The word pillow is a compound word that could be translated, Jay Green translated as headrest, or it could be translated head against. So more than likely they didn't have like a cabin with a bunk. The journeys wouldn't be too long, as they traveled to Tarshish, but there would be a seat, and you could sit back, and maybe there'd be some kind of cushion, and you put your head back and rest. And as we all know, you can easily fall asleep if you have a comfortable headrest. And so he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest not thou that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And this rising, we'll I want to get to that, or continue on that topic. But also, once he does rise, Peace, be still, and the sea's calm. The sea's calm. Because the sea typifies the wrath of God. Well, in sleep, picturing death, he pays the penalty for the wrath, just like Jonah when he's tossed overboard into a raging sea. The whale swallows him up, and the sea becomes still. It becomes a peaceful sea. And of course, peace, be still. Just to mention this, I might forget later, so I want to get it said. Ephesians chapter 2, we read concerning the Lord Jesus Christ in verse 14, for he is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preached peace to you which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. He is our peace. We were in enmity with God. We were at war with him. We were rebellious against him. And in that war, we would most certainly lose and be utterly destroyed. Yet Christ intercedes, comes between, and stands in our stead, and he suffers the force of the wrath of God, and he was smitten, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, and in death, not only death, and that'll get us back to the point I want to make, but in death he pays the penalty, but you don't know that until he rises from the dead. If Christ died for us and remained dead, how do we know he was successful in the atonement? How do we know that the penalty was fully paid? Maybe he was swallowed up by death. Maybe death was victorious over him. Maybe the wage of paying the penalty of death for so many was too great, and he wasn't able to sufficiently make the payment. See, it's not the death that stills the sea. It's when he rises from the dead. It says in Matthew 8, in Matthew chapter 8, verse 23, and when he was entered into a ship, his disciples followed him, and behold, there arose a great tempest in the sea, insomuch that the ship was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. And his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. Save us, O Lord. And then in verse 26, he saith unto them, why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. This is beautiful, isn't it? He arose. What does that make you think of? Well, it happens to be the same word. It's Strong's number 1453, and we find it in, well, we'll look at a few places. Let's go to Matthew 9, 24 and 25. He said unto them, give place, for the maid is not dead, but sleepeth. The maid, the young girl, she was dead physically. She was dead. All the people there knew she was dead, but Christ is trying to make a point. And we can see he's also tying death with sleep. She, for the maid is not dead, but sleepeth, and they laughed him to scorn. But when the people were put forth, he went in and took her by the hand, and the maid arose, and the fame hereof went abroad into all that land. She rose from the dead. She got up. She was dead. You don't get up from the dead um, unless you have the power of God that is doing that within you. And just like Lazarus, when Christ commanded, Lazarus, come forth, and he which was dead 4 days, he stinketh, his sister said. By now he stinketh. He was dead 4 days. He which was dead came forth. And this same word is in Matthew 16. The word arose from Matthew 8. He arose after they cried out, Lord, save us, save us. And then in Matthew 16, it says in verse, let's see, which were verse 21, from that time forth began Jesus to show unto his disciples how that he must go unto Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised again the third day. Raised again is the same word. It's the word from Matthew 28 in verses 6 and 7, and this is the resurrection chapter. And it says, as the disciples come to the tomb, Matthew 28 verse 6, he is not here, for he is risen. As he said, come see the place where the Lord lay, and go quickly. And by the way, where the Lord lay, remember with Jonah? He went down into the sides of the ship and lay and fell fast asleep. And so this too gives the idea, of laying in death. Come see the place where the Lord lay. Verse 7, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him. Lo, I have told you. He is risen. The word we read in Ephesians 5 earlier. In verse 14, that's the same word. Where it says, wherefore he saith, awake, thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Arise from the dead. That is the spiritual picture that is going on in these gospel accounts with Christ in the ship and going to sleep, pointing to death. He was asleep, Matthew 8:24, and his disciples came to him, verse 25, and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we perish. Well, how can the disciples awaken Christ from death? In the sense that I was mentioning, that in death Christ bore the sins of his people. And why did he do that? Well, out of love. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. And he knows the only way to save them is to pay the price for their sin for them. And so he did. But again, a big part of the atonement is the successful completion, the finishing of it, to make sure the payment has been received in full, that there's no more death, for any of those elect to pay. And so Christ rose from the dead, and then the water calms. Then the peace be still. There's peace between God and his elect people. So that's the wonderful picture, that we're seeing. And if we go back to Jonah chapter 1, notice that the mariners woke up Jonah, didn't they? Just like the disciples woke up Christ. That would be another similarity in Jonah 1. It says in verse 5, then the mariners were afraid and cried every man unto his God, and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. So the shipmaster came to him and said unto him, What meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God. If so be the God will think upon us, that we perish not. And exactly what those on board the ship in the Sea of Galilee were saying to Jesus, Lord, do you not care we perish? Save us, save us. And the mariners, they go wake up Jonah. So that would complete that spiritual picture. That would complete that spiritual picture and get us right into the next one, because then Jonah is he's awoke. He's no longer sleeping. So that portrait is accomplished. But now there's going to be an even bigger picture, even grander scale, where God will highlight the atonement once again by having the storm continue to rage and force the mariners to cast Jonah overboard, and that will point to, as I was mentioning earlier, the determinate counsel of God. Christ had to go to the cross. He had to do this in order to make manifest what he had done concerning the sins of his people at the foundation of the world.
Thank you for joining us for E-Bible Fellowship's Evening Bible Studies with your host and Bible teacher, Chris McCann. For more studies and information, visit our website at www.ebiblefellowship.org. Until our next Bible study, may the Lord's perfect will be done.